It's now time for your Election Crimes Bulletin with Greg Palast.
And you are hearing the Election Crimes Bulletin on Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. Welcome back. Greg Palast, investigator extraordinaire, filmmaker, has a film or two that is very relevant. We're going to be talking about that in this edition of the Election Crimes Bulletin. Greg, how are you doing? Let me just ask you a general question. The whole world is watching. Will we have a president elected who has declared essentially an end to the republic? Will Biden be back? What's going on? What are your biggest fears here? This ain't looking good.
Well, okay, let's stop counting Biden's brain cells and start counting vigilantes. It was very interesting, by the way, that the latest poll shows that there was literally no effect of the debate on the polls. What will affect the outcome, I mean, that was just a new Siena poll. The debates, it's already drifted away. But the issue is not Biden's brain power or lack thereof. The issue is that this election is going to be vote suppression bacchanalia. I've never seen anything like it. In particular, now the thing that you should be looking out for that isn't being covered in the press while they're so focused on whether George Clooney likes Biden at his fundraisers, is that right now there's a whole new system of attacking voters of color. And it's just no one is covering this. It's virtually uncovered. States all over the country were purging voters from the voter rolls, but they can't do that within 3 months of an election. They're removing millions of voters, but at least people have a chance to get back on the voter rolls, and they get postcards and they get notice that they've been removed. This is something new. For the first time since 1946, private individuals have been authorized by governments from Georgia to Arizona that any person, you, Dennis Bernstein, can challenge the vote of Greg Palast and say, Greg Palast, you're not a real California voter. You can't vote. This is not minor. These are vigilante, self-appointed vote challengers, and they can do this on the day of the election. And are you ready for this? You know, we did a film, and a lot of KPFA listeners and KPFK listeners saw my film, Vigilante, Georgia's Vote Suppression Hitman, about the challenge to 180,000 voters in Georgia. Well, our film is credited with reversing those challenges, almost all of them. But now the law in Georgia's changed, so it's harder to challenge the challengers. But even more, this thing has spread from Georgia to 50 states. But it's concentrated in battleground states. Now, dig this. Mark Elias, who's considered the number one voting rights attorney these days, has said this is a virus coming out of Georgia, these vigilante voter challenges, saying, now when I say 88 voter vigilantes challenging voters, 180,000 voters, every single one of the 88 were GOP operatives. They're all Republicans. I'm not being partisan about that. That's just the fact. There's not one Democratic challenger. All 88 are Republicans, and the lists smell of race. One guy challenged 4,000 black soldiers at Fort Benning in Georgia. But now, as Mark Elias pointed out, this virus of vigilantism has spread to other states. Now, dig this, Dennis. Here's the number you got to listen to. Take this down. In Georgia in 2022, when they first launched this vigilante game, they had 88 vigilante vote challengers, people who were challenging people in their counties. Right now, the group that put together the challenge list, True the Vote, that group has now already signed up from 88. They've gone to 44,000 vigilante challengers. Let me repeat that. 44,000 vigilantes have signed up to challenge voters in their county. And some of these have challenged as many as 32,000 people. And 44,000, by the way, Dennis, should ring a bell, because 44,000 was Biden's victory margin in 2020. So if we have the same vote as 2020, and each vigilante knocks off only one voter, and like I say, they can challenge thousands. If vigilantes knock off one voter, 44,000 vigilantes knock off one voter, that's the end of the election. Biden loses. And it's not a matter, I'm not a partisan for Biden. I'm not partisan at all. I'm just telling you the facts. 44,000 vigilantes, and that's just one group, True the Vote. And they are that group out of Texas that did that film 2,000 Mules. I mean, people may laugh at them. They may say it's discredited, but they signed up 44,000 people who will each get a list from their county of people to challenge. And the lists
okay, all right. Say a little bit more about this. So how does this work, Greg? So you've got these 44,000
So what happens is you sign up, you go to True the Vote.
What happens next? Yeah.
Okay, so what happens is that you want to sign up to be a vigilante, and they check out your background, so they don't allow guys like Greg Palast to get into their system. You have to give them your license and your registration. You get a list. You say what county you're in, like Cobb County, Georgia, or Maricopa County, Arizona. Arizona's a big target. And if you're in a certain county like Maricopa, which is Phoenix, they give you a whole list of voters that they say don't properly live at their voting address. Now, you have to understand, the states are already knocking off all the voters that don't live at their voting address. None of these people, and when I say none of them, I mean zero, none, zero, are wrongful voters. But they'll take someone named Jose Hernandez in Phoenix, and they'll say Jose Hernandez is put in a change of address form. And believe it or not, they find another Jose Hernandez in Phoenix, and they challenge their vote. Now, what does Jose Hernandez have to do? First of all, he has to find out he's been challenged, and no one knows that they've been challenged, or they show up to vote and they say you've been challenged. You have to go into your county clerk. You have to make a special trip to your county clerk's office and prove you are who you are and live where you live. And most people aren't going to do that. They don't even know they've been challenged. A lot of people that mail in their ballots don't know that their mail-in ballots have been thrown in the garbage because they've been challenged. So you have these. This is not the government. This is private people, connected to these right-wing organizations and the GOP, True the Vote and others. And they are just saying, here's a list of voters whose ballots should not be counted. And there were 180,000 challenges by 88 vigilantes. Now there's 44,000 vigilantes. This is going to be a cluster cluck of the worst order on Election Day because these guys, because they're not the government, so they're not restricted. They can't stop the governments can't purge within 3 months of a federal election. These guys, including like in swing states like Georgia, can actually challenge on the day or even the day after the election when the absentee ballots are being counted. This is the absolute biggest threat. It's barely covered by the mainstream press while they're, just distracted by the Biden soap opera.
You're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. We're speaking with Greg Palast, and we're talking about voting and election and what's happening. It's bad enough, Greg, what we see in terms of general election candidates, but now there is clearly a number of levels on which these elections can be turned upside down. We've been following this a long time with you, Greg. People have been screwing with the elections for a long time, but it does seem like a combination of events could empower these folks who you've been fighting for years to be finally effective in their final solution, which is totally having the capability, the capacity to undermine the very right to vote. Here comes Jim Crow on steroids.
Well, it's not just Jim Crow. It's the Klan plan. So understand where this vigilante voter challenge system comes from. It comes from the Ku Klux Klan created this system in 1946. The Ku Klux Klan of Georgia incorporated itself. I'm not kidding you. They incorporated themselves, and they called themselves Vigilantes, Inc. That was their cover for the Klan. And then the Klan went out and challenged, according to the FBI, they challenged every single black voter in many counties in Georgia. This is 1946. And they got the Klan's chief strategist, a guy named Eugene Talmadge. He was elected governor because they removed all these black voters. But, and here's the strange thing, in 1946, and this is before the Voting Rights Act, this is before the Civil Rights Act, 1946, Harry Truman's FBI we're about to arrest Governor Talmadge for leading this mass attack on black voters. But he happened to drink himself to death just literally days before they were going to arrest him. He drank himself to death. He was a notorious alcoholic. But imagine, in 1946, this Klan plan to challenge black voters en masse was considered a crime. And today, they're doing it, and the courts are blessing it. So wait, it was illegal before, in 46. Now we have the Voting Rights Act, we have the National Voter Registration Act, we have the Civil Rights Act, and somehow it's just perfectly fine with our federal courts to mass challenge voters of color. It's unbelievable. This is the Klan plan, and this is what Trump is doing, and no one's calling it out. I put in a Freedom of Information Act request with the FBI, and I got their files. And, they're talking about how mass challenges are legal. They wrote up this indictment. They were going to just bust the governor of Georgia, who's a Klan member, a Klan strategist. But today, hey, Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia, he's doing the Klan plan. So what? I was just in Arizona. I was in Texas. I was in Michigan. I was in Wisconsin. They are doing this. And that's why actually we're making a new film, updating our old film, called Vigilantes, Inc., which is named after the Ku Klux Klan Corporation, and it's America's new vote suppression hitmen. This is our key danger of this Klan plan.
Talk a little bit about what the atmospheric pressure is on the ground. You mentioned you were in Arizona and other states. Talk about the atmospheric pressure, the way in which progressives, anybody who sort of takes on the establishment is facing a machine that is going to undermine their vote and maybe lead to legal action very easily to arrest people for illegal voting. This is not going in a good direction.
That's the other thing is that, okay, so a few things. One, it's getting violent. I was out in Arizona at a Kerry Lake rally, and who was the honored guest? It was the QAnon shaman. Remember the guy who had the horns on his head and sitting in Nancy Pelosi's desk? He had literally gotten out of jail a couple days before, and he was the honored guest for Republican candidate Kerry Lake in Arizona. They are applauding the violent. And then I spoke to Teresa Mabley, who's with a voter protection group in Arizona. She says that when Hispanic voters show up at a drop box, they're flying drones over them to intimidate them, scare them away from voting. And then even worse, they've got guys with automatic weapons standing next to the voter drop boxes because Arizona is an open carry state. And so they just stand next to the drop box, these white guys dressed up in military uniforms, standing next to the drop box. Now, would you take your family to drop off their votes? If some guy with a gun and bandanas over their faces and the whole military regalia were standing there armed, they have now put together 50 defense teams to go out and de-escalate, basically shoo these guys away, which is dangerous. They're not confronting them with guns. They're just trying to get the guys with the guns away. So it's ugly. It's getting violent. And then I went to Texas, where they accused the supervisor of Harris County, which is Houston, of forging 700,000 ballots. It got violent. They were outside his house with guns and automatic weapons, intimidating him and his family. And then they ran a guy with an air conditioning truck who they thought had the illegal ballots all in the back of his truck, and they ran him off the road. When they opened the back of the truck, it was air conditioning parts. But the added violence with the intimidation, with the vigilante challenges, is just gotten wild. And it's really dangerous. We're going to see dead bodies in this election. I'm not kidding you.
And of course, there's a lot of tension and attempts at voter suppression within the indigenous communities, within the Native American communities.
That's right. In fact,
also engaged there as well. You want to talk about that?
Yes, indeed. I've been out to both the pueblos in New Mexico, which is now in play, and they are mass challenging the votes of American natives, of the people in the pueblos. They played games like they struck all these names off the list because, in a lot of pueblos and tribal areas, you don't have official addresses, street addresses like 1622 Smith Street. Instead, it will say 2 doors down from the gas station. Well, under the Patriot Act, those cannot be used as voting addresses. So they're given provisional ballots. And I remember in one case in New Mexico, and I can't make this one up, the state gave the one pueblo, the Acoma Pueblo, provisional ballots with envelopes to put them in. Almost every single Acoma Pueblo resident who voted early, almost every single one was shunted to a provisional ballot. They sent in the provisional ballots in the envelopes, and the county disqualified all the votes saying they're the wrong envelopes, even though they're the envelopes that the county gave them. No one is protecting that native vote. And by the way, just so you know, that's the most democratic demographic in America. It's like it gets close to 100% Democratic. And again, I'm not partisan. I'm just saying what the facts are on the ground. And in addition, in Arizona, the Pasquayaki Reservation, they simply removed, there's no voting booths there. There's no voting stations in the entire area. They're going to have to drive 100 miles round trip to vote if they want to vote in person. So people rarely look at suppression of the American native vote. The problem is that they are in swing states. They're in Arizona. They're in New Mexico. There's a big contingent in Michigan. So you have to understand that when you go after the native vote, that's your swing margin. Like I say, Biden only won the election by 44,000 votes out of 180 million cast because of our electoral college system. And those American native votes are in those swing states. And so, but no one is moving to protect their votes. Well, except the nations themselves. Like I was just with the Osage Nation in Oklahoma, and they sent out a whole team of people to Arizona to make sure that people were able to properly register and fill out their mail-in ballots, which if it weren't for the native vote, if it weren't for the tribal vote, Biden would not have won Arizona. It'd be all over with. And Nevada, same thing. If it weren't for saving the American native vote, Biden would have been toast. And again, it's not about being partisan. It's about letting the voters choose, not the vigilantes.
Now, Greg, let's just say a word about corporate networks have spent a lot of time, and we've spent some time covering the kind of illegal activities that various individuals who have been running for various offices have been committing, crimes they've been committing. And it looked like a whole bunch of people were going to be held accountable for a whole bunch of crimes. But what happened? What happened to Atlanta? What happened to all that? How many times did we hear? How much money did MSNBC make on sort of doing the story about how Trump called and said, "Can't you find us those votes?" What happened to all those stories?
Well, what's happened is that, first of all, these investigations all started late. And when Trump says it's a political prosecution, I think it was a political non-prosecution. That is, I think the Justice Department and the state of Georgia and and Fulton County in Georgia, all these places, they were, I think, hoping, they were literally not investigating Trump, hoping he would just disappear. But crime's a crime. Why, the crime, like the attack on January 6th, which is one of the, Jack Smith, the federal prosecutor, who has the strongest case that would, in fact, remove Donald Trump from the race and prevent him from being president. So it's the federal cases that would stop him from being president. But the Justice Department, under Merrick Garland, waited 2 years. It was January 6th. He should have immediately said, I can't deal with it. It's a political issue. We're going to a special prosecutor. But they waited 2 years. So it's not possible under the U.S. legal system. You can stall and stall. Plus, the U.S. Supreme Court has done everything but get on their hands and knees and bark for Donald Trump. They said that he's immune for certain acts that kills off half of these prosecutions, that he has some imperial immunity. They also slowed down the cases so that they knew damn well that these cases could not be completed by election time. And then once Trump is inaugurated, no question, he's going to pardon himself, which he can do. He can't do it under the state law. But, I just spoke with Gerald Griggs, who's a top trial attorney, but he's also head of the NAACP of Georgia, and he's my personal attorney. And he said, Trump may be president, but it'll be a president from inside a Georgia jail cell. I just don't see this Supreme Court allowing the commander-in-chief to sit in prison while he's supposed to be commander-in-chief. So I just don't see that. And I just see the federal court stepping in and saying all trials are frozen and the federal trials are dead because he's pardoned himself. The delay here was unbelievable, and I think that was political.
Okay, can we beat that dead horse a little bit? Why in the world would the Attorney General, who repeatedly says no one is above the law, why in the freaking world would he wait over a year to appoint a special prosecutor? Everybody knew where this was going. Why? And don't forget,
I want to remind you
that
Merrick...
he could hide under a couch? Trump would go away, and then he'd become a Supreme Court justice. What fantasy?
Well, I want to make this even more cringeworthy, Dennis.
Yes.
Merrick Garland, when he appointed the special counsel, only appointed him to look into Trump's stealing the documents from the White House and lying about it. That's the only thing Merrick Garland was assigned to do. But under federal law, you can't tell a special prosecutor what your limits are. So he immediately said, okay, yeah, I'm charging him on the crimes in Florida for stealing secret government documents, and who knows if he sold it somewhere. But that's the suspicion. But the other is that Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, said, you can't control my indictments. I go where the evidence leads me. And he added in January 6th, he added in coming up with false electors. I mean, it's a complete fraud on the American government and the American people by saying they put up all these names of people who are supposed to be elected as electors voting for Trump, and they try to get Pence to adopt these people, but they never ran for office. You have to be elected. That's why we have what we call elections. Anyway, so Merrick Garland never gave authority to Jack Smith to take on the January 6th riot. Jack Smith just said, I'm doing it, and you can't stop me. So, the Justice Department has been totally obstructive going after Trump, and now America is paying the price. I don't know about Merrick Garland, but I know that America is paying the price. You also have the issue, circling back to those vigilante challenges, Cleta Mitchell, Trump's private lawyer. She was actually on the phone with Trump when he called the state of Georgia and said, find me 11,000 votes. His lawyer on the phone with him. She's formed a vigilante hunting group. She's already challenged 10,000 voters in Georgia. Why she isn't in the hoosegow, I don't know. But she's taking away your vote. She's running around free. And needless to say, well, if Trump gets in, he's going to pardon her. It's his lawyer. He may not pay her. He's notorious. He probably won't pay her, but he's going to pardon her. I'm sure she'll take that deal. So that's what we're facing in this election. And I wish people would get off the Biden brainwash and start looking at what's happening on the ground with the attack on voting rights. And that's what the black community is missing. Also, I do know that my friend, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who I work with from Rainbow Push, has begged Biden, and so is the NAACP, please sign an executive order stopping these vigilantes. Sign an executive order that the feds are going to come in and start grabbing these guys who are making wild accusations and stopping people from voting. It is a clear violation of federal law, even without the Voting Rights Act. It is a violation of our Constitution. And that's what the FBI under Harry Truman thought. And why isn't the FBI saying the same thing today? And they have more laws to call on. Stop the vigilantes right now. This is the KKK plan. It was illegal in 46. It ought to be illegal now.
I just keep thinking of this phrase that one of my students, I used to teach for John Jay College in Rikers Island. And one of my students there in my prison class said, you know, Bernstein, come on, let's face it. The law is a legal excuse to lie. And what I translate that into Trump land, and it does seem, Greg, as long as you can finance as many lawyers as you need, you can keep the ball rolling. You can undermine any kind of criminal prosecution forever. Am I
Well, yes,
wrong?
in fact, I got to tell you that behind these the vigilante challenges, there are these right-wing billionaires like the Bradley Foundation. And they also have teams of lawyers on their payroll. The Bradley Foundation has something called the Wisconsin Law and Legal Society. They have all these groups, and they are fielding teams of lawyers to protect vigilantes. They are fielding teams of lawyers to force states to remove people from the voter rolls. This is going to be the most violently rigged election in my lifetime, and I kid you not. And when I say rigged, I don't want to. I know it's he's talking like Donald Trump. No, I'm saying that the truth is, as you heard in my intro, yeah, the election's rigged because Trump's cronies are rigging it. I'm sorry, there's no other way to put it. When you're knocking off thousands and thousands and thousands of black voters, and the trick, one of the ugliest tricks that they pull is they take soldiers, black soldiers and Hispanic soldiers who've been assigned off their military base and challenging the right to vote because they say, well, they don't live in the state where their base is anymore. Well, you don't lose your vote because you go defend America, and the President of the United States has told you to go to Germany or go to California or go to Saudi Arabia. You're not supposed to lose your vote. You're still an American citizen, even if you're a black soldier. It's really
listen, Greg,
ugly.
It is ugly, and that's why it's a good thing that we continue our work with you with the Election Crimes Bulletin. There's so much to keep an eye on. We're out of time now, but gregpalast.com, check out his work there, and we will continue to try and protect the vote with Greg Palast, to protect your vote with Greg Palast. Thank you, Greg. We appreciate the time and the great investigations.
Thank you, Dennis. Bye.